After that first evening, her mother started visiting more often. At first, it was under the guise of checking in or bringing food. "You shouldn't live on takeout," she'd say with a small smile, placing a warm dish on the counter. But slowly, the visits became less about food and more about company. Two lonely people, both abandoned by someone they loved in different ways, finding strange comfort in silence and small talk. Her name was Margaret, but she told me to call her Maggie. There was something grounding about her presence. She wasn't like her daughter. Maggie carried a quiet strength, the kind that only comes from surviving heartbreak and learning how to keep moving. She'd ask how I was sleeping, if I was eating properly, if I'd thought about taking some time off work. Her concern was genuine, not pitying. One night, I found her sitting on my porch, wrapped in a shawl, looking up at the stars. "Do you ever think about how people just leave?" she asked softly when I joined her. "They walk away as if the years they shared meant nothing. But the ones left behind, they're the ones who live with all the noise in their heads." I nodded. "Every night," I said. We talked for hours that evening, about love, disappointment, and the quiet kind of pain that doesn't leave scars but lingers like a shadow. I learned things about her daughter I'd never known, her childhood dreams, her restlessness, her tendency to run when things got too real. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it helped me understand the brokenness that led to it. Weeks passed, and Maggie's presence became something I looked forward to. She brought warmth into my empty house, laughter into rooms that hadn't heard it in months. She'd tease me about my inability to cook or the fact that I still hadn't taken down the framed photo of my wife. "You're not ready yet," she'd say gently. "When you are, you'll know." There was one evening I'll never forget. It was raining hard, the kind of downpour that blurs the world into streaks of silver. She'd come by unexpectedly, soaked from the walk from her car. I offered her a towel, made tea, and we sat by the fireplace. Her eyes reflected the flicker of the flames, tired, yet alive. "Do you blame me?" she asked suddenly, catching me off guard. "For what? For raising her the way I did? For not teaching her to stay when things get hard?" Her voice trembled just slightly, enough to reveal the guilt she carried. I shook my head. "No one can teach someone how to love right. We all learn the hard way." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "You sound wiser than you think." The room went quiet again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that speaks. She reached out, resting her hand briefly on my arm, a simple gesture, yet it lingered in the air between us, stirring emotions I wasn't ready to name. In her, I saw something familiar, a reflection of my own loneliness. Two people trying to fill the same void in different ways. She never crossed any lines, and neither did I. But something unspoken began to grow, an emotional closeness that felt both dangerous and healing. Over time, she became my anchor. When I came home from work, the house no longer felt like a graveyard of memories. Her laughter lingered in the corners, her kindness softened the edges of my grief. Sometimes, I'd catch myself waiting for her call, wondering if she was thinking of me too. One Sunday afternoon, she asked if she could help me clear out my wife's closet. It had been months since she left, and I hadn't touched a thing. I hesitated but finally agreed. Together, we folded clothes, sorted through old photos, and packed away remnants of a love that had faded long before it ended. At one point, she held up a photo, my wife and I smiling at a beach years ago. "You loved her deeply," Maggie said softly. "I did," I whispered. "Maybe I still do, or maybe I just miss who she used to be." They say temptation comes quietly, like a whisper behind a closed door. For me, it came wearing a pressed uniform, holding my husband's car keys, and calling me ma'am. I never planned for it. I never even thought I was capable of it. But what happened that night in that hotel mirror changed the way I saw myself, forever. I used to think loneliness was a word for the unloved. Married women like me weren't supposed to feel it. I had everything, a house that smelled of fresh roses, a husband who provided, and a life most would envy. Yet, every night, I'd lie awake, feeling the space beside me grow colder. My husband, Charles, was a man of schedules. His life revolved around meetings, boardrooms, and clients who always seemed to need him more than I did. Our marriage, once filled with laughter and midnight conversations, had become a polite partnership, efficient, predictable, and painfully quiet. Then came Daniel, the driver. He was new, hired after our old one retired. I didn't pay him much attention at first. He was reserved, always addressing me with respect, his deep voice steady and calm. But there was something about his eyes, the kind that looked at you like they saw more than they should. One morning, as he opened the car door for me, our fingers brushed. Just a fleeting touch, but it lingered longer than it should have. I saw something in his gaze then, something curious, almost dangerous. I dismissed it, but every day afterward, I felt his presence more, in the rearview mirror, in the way he adjusted the car temperature for my comfort, in how he remembered small things about me my husband had long forgotten. He wasn't just my husband's driver anymore. He had become the only person who seemed to notice me. Then came the business trip. Charles was away for 3 weeks. He'd left Daniel to look after me, his words, not mine. I laughed when he said it. But as the days passed, that laughter faded into something I couldn't name. I didn't know then that my life was about to take a turn I could never undo. It was raining that afternoon when it began. I had an appointment at a boutique downtown. Daniel drove me there, quiet as usual, but I could sense the tension. The kind that fills a car when two people are thinking about the same thing but too afraid to speak it aloud. The rain grew heavier, and traffic slowed to a crawl. "Ma'am," he said, his voice breaking the silence, "maybe we should stop somewhere until it clears." I nodded. We pulled into a small roadside hotel, one of those discreet places people use to wait out storms. I remember thinking how strange it felt, sitting there beside him, watching droplets race down the windshield, our breaths clouding the cool air between us. Inside the hotel, the receptionist gave us that knowing look. I tried not to think about what she saw. We just needed shelter, nothing more. The room was modest, with a single mirror across from the bed. I sat on the chair, scrolling through my phone, pretending not to feel his eyes on me. But I did. I felt them every second. When I finally looked up, he wasn't looking away this time. He stood near the mirror, his reflection meeting mine. "You don't seem happy, ma'am," he said softly. Something in his tone pierced through the wall I'd built for years. "Why would you say that?" I asked, trying to sound composed. "Because I drive you every day," he said. "And not once have I seen you smile for real." My throat tightened. I didn't respond. He looked away first, respectful, cautious, but the damage was done. The moment he said those words, he saw the truth I had hidden even from myself. That I wasn't happy, that I was lonely, that for the first time in years, someone had noticed. The sound of the rain outside softened to a whisper, like the world itself was holding its breath. I remember the hum of the air conditioner, the faint ticking of the wall clock, and how small that hotel room suddenly felt. It wasn't the place, it was the tension. It filled every inch between us. Daniel stood by the mirror, his reflection watching me more boldly than he ever had in person. His eyes met mine through the glass, and for a brief second, I couldn't tell if I was staring at him, or at the woman I had become. I wasn't the same person I used to be. The confident wife, the polished hostess, the smiling woman who posed perfectly for social photos, she was gone. What remained was a woman who felt invisible, craving something real, something that didn't come wrapped in luxury or routine. He must have sensed that. Because when he spoke again, his voice was softer, lower. "You deserve to be happy, ma'am," he said. "You just don't look like someone who is." That word again, happy. It sounded almost foreign. I didn't even know what it meant anymore. I stood up, forcing a small smile. "Happiness isn't that simple, Daniel." He turned toward me, slowly, his eyes holding mine in a way that made time seem irrelevant. "Maybe not, but sometimes, we make it complicated when it doesn't have to be." I wanted to argue. I wanted to remind him who he was, my husband's driver. And who I was, his boss's wife. But instead, I found myself standing there, close enough to see the way his breath fogged the mirror, close enough to feel the heat radiating from him. It wasn't what he said that shocked me. It was what he meant. He wasn't just staring at me in the mirror, he was looking through me, like he could see the parts one tried to bury, the frustration, the unmet needs, the ache of being unseen. I turned away, flustered. "You should wait outside," I murmured, reaching for my bag. He didn't move. "You don't have to be afraid of being honest," he said quietly. "Not with me." That broke something inside me. Maybe it was the months of silence at home, the absence of warmth in my husband's eyes, or the exhaustion of pretending that everything was fine. But in that moment, I couldn't hold it anymore. "I'm not afraid," I said. But my voice trembled. He took one careful step closer. Not threatening, not reckless, just enough to make my heart race. "Then stop hiding." I looked back at the mirror. Two people stood there, one wearing a wedding ring, the other holding a truth neither of them could take back. I didn't know what came over me, but I whispered, "Do you know what you're saying, Daniel?" He nodded, his reflection steady. "Yes, I've known since the day you looked at me and smiled for the first time." It wasn't just a smile. It was a plea. That word, plea, echoed in my chest. Something inside me wanted to run, to escape before the line between right and wrong completely disappeared. But another part, the part that had been starved for affection, attention, validation, stayed rooted to the spot. He didn't touch me. He didn't have to. The way he looked at me said everything. When the rain finally stopped, the silence was louder than thunder. We left the hotel quietly, pretending nothing had happened. But deep down, I knew something had changed. I sat in the backseat on the drive home, my reflection still visible in the car window, a woman staring at her own choices, her own hunger, her own secret. And even though nothing physical had happened that day, something far more dangerous had begun. After that day at the hotel, something shifted between us, something neither of us dared to name. It wasn't loud or obvious, but it was there. Like a hum beneath every word, every shared glance, every quiet car ride that stretched too long and ended too soon. I told myself I wouldn't see him differently. That I'd keep my distance, that it was all just a misunderstanding. But you can't unhear a truth once it's been spoken, not when it's the truth your heart has been starving to admit. The following week, Charles came home briefly between business trips. He kissed my cheek, thanked me for managing the house, and retreated to his study. We spoke less than 15 words that night. His phone buzzed more than his laughter did. And while I sat in silence across the dinner table, all I could think about was the way Daniel had looked at me through that mirror. I hated myself for it. The next morning, when Daniel pulled the car around, I hesitated before getting in. I could feel his presence even before I opened the door. He greeted me politely, as always, but there was an unspoken weight in his tone. "Good morning, ma'am." "Morning," I whispered, my voice lower than usual. As we drove, the city blurred past my window, glass towers, passing faces, moments I wasn't truly living in. My thoughts were somewhere else entirely. Somewhere behind that mirror. Halfway through the ride, I spoke before I could stop myself. About that day, let's forget it ever happened. He didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "If that's what you want." But the way he said it told me he knew I didn't mean it. We both pretended after that. We talked about the weather, my errands, his schedule. Everything except what mattered. Yet the silence between us was louder than any confession. A few days later, my husband left again, another, urgent meeting, overseas. He barely looked up from his suitcase as he said goodbye. "Take care, darling. Daniel will drive you anywhere you need." I remember nodding, but inside, I felt something crumble. Not because he was leaving, but because I wasn't sure I wanted him to stay anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked to the balcony, wrapped in my robe, staring out at the city lights. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Greater than, "Are you okay, ma'am?" I stared at the screen. It was such a simple question, but no one had asked me that in years, not like they truly meant it. Greater than, "I'm fine," I typed. Then erased it. "Not really," I wrote instead. His reply came quickly. Greater than, "I figured. I'm still outside if you need anything." I froze. I hadn't even realized he hadn't left yet. He was still parked outside, waiting, long after his duty was done. Before I could think about it, I went downstairs. He was leaning against the car, the streetlights painting soft gold across his shoulders. When he saw me, he straightened. "You shouldn't be out here this late," he said gently. "Neither should you," I replied. We stood there, silent, the night air thick between us. I could hear my heartbeat, slow, deliberate, impossible to hide. "You should go inside," he said, but his voice trembled just enough to betray what he really wanted. "Why are you still here, Daniel?" I asked. He looked at me, really looked at me. "Because I didn't want to leave you alone." And just like that, the line we had pretended didn't exist began to fade. He didn't move closer, and I didn't step away. It wasn't about touch, it was about recognition. Two people standing in the dark, acknowledging what neither of them had the right to feel. After a long silence, he whispered, "You should get some rest." I nodded, my throat tight. "Good night, Daniel." As I turned to go, he said softly, "You deserve more than just good nights." I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by a single thought: what if he was right? It's strange how guilt doesn't always come right away. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, like the slow chill that follows after warmth. I didn't feel it that night. Not the next morning either. It came later, like a delayed echo, when I caught my reflection again in that same hotel mirror. Yes, I went back. Not because I planned to. Not because I wanted to do something reckless. I told myself it was a coincidence, an errand nearby, a simple lunch break. But deep down, I think I wanted to see if that reflection, the woman Daniel had looked at, still existed. She did, and she looked nothing like the wife I used to be. That morning, I had asked Daniel to drive me to the city for a meeting. It ended earlier than expected, and as we were heading back, I noticed the familiar street. That same hotel. My heart fluttered before my mind could reason. Stop here, I said. He looked at me in the rearview mirror. Here, yes, I answered. My voice didn't sound like mine anymore. We parked. I got out, walked into the lobby, and felt my pulse race as if stepping into a memory. The receptionist wasn't the same person, thank God. But the mirror in the hallway was still there. The same one that had reflected our unspoken truth weeks ago. Daniel followed me in. He didn't ask why we were there. He just stood quietly, waiting. When I turned toward him, something inside me broke, the part that still believed I could control what was happening. You shouldn't have come in, I whispered. You asked me to stop, he said simply. We stood facing each other, the silence pulling us closer than words ever could. Then he said it, the thing that would stay with me forever. Ma'am, do you ever think maybe the life you're living isn't the one you were meant for? I froze. My mouth opened, but no words came. Because he wasn't wrong. I had spent years pretending, being the perfect wife, the quiet partner, the woman who smiled on cue. But inside, I had been fading. I don't know anymore, I said quietly. I don't even know who I am when he's not around. He stepped closer. Not daring, not careless, just close enough for honesty. Maybe that's who you need to find again. I looked at him, not the driver, not the man who wasn't supposed to see me this way, but the one who had. The one who, without trying, made me feel visible. Then it happened, not in the way stories exaggerate, not in passion or chaos, but in stillness. Our eyes met in that mirror, just as before. No lies, no excuses. Just truth reflected back at me. I didn't touch him, he didn't touch me, but something invisible passed between us, something that had already gone too far. I turned away first. This can't happen, I said, my voice trembling. I know, he replied. But pretending it didn't already change you would be another lie. And he was right again. That day, I walked out of that hotel knowing I couldn't go back. Not to the mirror, not to that moment, not to who I was before it. Later that evening, as he dropped me home, neither of us spoke. The silence said enough. When I stepped out of the car, he said softly, "Take care, ma'am." It was the last time he called me that. A week later, my husband mentioned that Daniel had resigned. Said he had a family matter, Charles told me casually, pouring himself a drink. I nodded, keeping my expression still. But inside, I felt something twist, loss, guilt, maybe both. That night, I stood before my bedroom mirror, the one that had reflected years of quiet endurance, and for the first time, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She wasn't a villain, she wasn't innocent either, she was just, human. People ask why I'm anonymous. It's not because I'm ashamed, though I am. It's because I know how judgment works. People love to condemn what they've never felt. But what I felt that day wasn't sin. It was awakening, a mirror held up to a part of me I thought had died long ago. And though I'll never see Daniel again, I sometimes catch my reflection unexpectedly, in a window, in a passing glass door, and I remember. Not the mistake, but the moment someone finally saw me. Sometimes, life doesn't break your heart in one loud crash, it does it quietly, moment by moment, until someone unexpected makes you feel alive again. And when that happens, you start to question everything. If you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or lost in your own reflection, you're not alone. Thank you for listening to my story. More true confessions are coming soon, stories of love, betrayal, and rediscovery. Don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter of truth. This story is a work of realistic fiction inspired by true emotional experiences. All names, characters, and situations are fictionalized for privacy. Intended for mature audiences, viewer discretion is advised. Thank you so much for being part of this story. Every view, every comment, and every subscription keeps this channel alive and motivates us to bring you more heartfelt, emotional, and unforgettable stories inspired by real-life experiences. If this story moved you, made you think, or simply kept you hooked till the end, please don't forget to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to this channel. Your support means everything. By subscribing, you'll never miss the next emotional tale of love, betrayal, forgiveness, and rediscovery. Stay tuned, more true infidelity stories are coming your way. Thank you once again, and see you in our next story.